Aloha, everyone. Welcome. Thank you for joining us in our Power in Partnership Master Series. Our intention is for you to learn some skills to help tend to that relational space, whether that relational space is the one you have in that relationship with yourself, with your spouse, your beloved, your partner, the other, or your relationship with spirit, or all of the above. Thank you so much for joining us. We are delighted to have you here, and I would love to welcome my guest, Tara Galeano. She is joining us from her Boulder, Colorado office, and we are going to discuss part of her passion and career path, including her certified sex therapy work, in particularly with the focus being on women in recovery from cancer, and helping them to find that recommitment to their own well-being, and their reigniting and rekindling their passion with their bodies and their sexuality. Am I getting you, Tara? Is that a
so absolutely. That's
good
great.
bio? Okay, great. Well, thank you for being here with us. Thank you, everyone, for joining us in this call. And wherever you are, however you are willing and able to join us, and just helping us come back to the present moment, we'll take a few conscious breaths together. So if you'd like to lower your gaze or close your eyes, if you're not driving, feel free to join us as we just take this moment to pause, to inhale deeply all that has already transpired today, and exhaling, releasing, and then inhaling together again all those desires and intentions for the rest of the day. Just noticing and releasing. And then inhaling the sweetness of this moment right here, right now. And exhaling, releasing. And then gently raising the gaze. And I have the good fortune of being with Tara, who is someone that I did my graduate studies with at Naropa back in 1997. And we met in a way of great intensity in our contemplative psychotherapy program. And Tara, one of my first and favorite memories of meeting you was seeing you with your young child, that you were breastfeeding in public. And I had never seen that before. And it was just such a beautiful sight to behold, that sense of nurturance. And many, many times I was able to recall that image throughout my own mothering journey, throughout my own process of breastfeeding, and that sense of holding. So I wanted to just say a thank you for that as a personal invitation to our audience of who you are and my knowing of you. And in that, really pull on our experience that we had at Naropa, and that sense of bowing to the present moment, bowing to the wisdom of the space between, if you will. And so I thought we would bookend our time together with just taking that moment to bow, to allow the head to drop below the heart, which in this day and age, we don't do very often. So thank you. I always love to rub my hands together, bringing that energy into the heart center. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Yeah. Is there anything else you would like to add by way of introduction of yourself? How would you want to greet the audience? Do you feel like we covered that?
Yeah, I think you did a great job. Thank you. I appreciate it. And I'm so thrilled to be here.
Yeah. I know that in your busy schedule of launching your own class, of getting your word out there, thank you for carving out the time to set aside and join us on this master series as well. And I would love to just offer a few sentence stems to once again tether us back to the present moment, to really be that fruitful foundation, if you will, for us to carry on our conversation today, which I'm lovingly dubbing as an intentional interview. So these are some phrases that I personally love to use in an intentional dialogue. And the way I love to start is just by offering up, as I'm sitting here, I'm experiencing. How would you respond?
Yeah, as I'm sitting here, I'm experiencing relaxation. I feel very relaxed and eager to have an intentional interview with you. I wish to share, but I also wish to learn from you.
Thank you. So I hear that sense of eagerness, and and willingness to both give and receive as we're in this space. So, yeah. And I guess I could chime in just a brief tether. As I'm sitting here, I'm feeling tremendous gratitude for rejoining with you as we've carried our trajectory of being of service to others and really committing to our own well-being and the well-being of our family, and just feeling that ripple effect going out in a very positive way of being a force for good in the world. So I'm feeling very honored to share this space and time with you. Another bow.
Yeah.
And so here we are in the present moment. Now I'm going to offer a sentence stem which really widens the lens of perspective and takes us on our larger journey, which is at the end of my career, at the end of my professional trajectory, the picture I paint for myself is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, at the end of my career, I really want to say that I have been of service to people. And step out of the way, myself, step out of my own way, but really offer it up to people. The wisdom, the goodness, the love that I have and have experienced in my life. I really want to share that with others. And so yesterday, as I mentioned before, I had spent the day in retreat, which was really critical for me so I could begin to formulate and see where it is that I want to be, at least at the end of this next year, and then see what it is that I have to give. So I just narrowed it down to 3 goals, and the first one being the online course, and the second one being a podcast series, and then the third one being speaking. So I'm really honored to be speaking with you today and to be focusing in on one of those goals already.
Yeah, I really get that you're already, it's a work in progress already. You're rolling with those goals, and speaking today is part of that, and getting the word out there in a regular way through podcasts and online classes. I know that you've been doing some in-person classes there in Boulder, and to bring that out to a virtual community will enhance the libraries for all of us, that sense of being resourced in this particular subject matter, as well as just your life journey. I really heard that sense of, in your career path, you want to be able to share what you've learned and what you've gathered in terms of the wisdom and the love and the energy, and share that with others. And that sense of what really struck me is that sense of taking a moment to pause and retreat yesterday in order to move forward. And I think that's a really key message I want to highlight for our audience to get, just as one of those skills, in enhancing the relationship we have with ourselves, is to be able to, I don't always have to be hitting that linear trajectory moving up. It's like, take the time to step back, to retreat, to go within in order to get clarity and move forward. Am I getting you?
Oh, yes, that's so true. Because in the past, when I haven't done that, although I've had fun, things have been haphazard, and I haven't achieved the things that I wanted to achieve. And I really do want to expand the opportunities for others to know about some of the things that I've been working on, and some of the good that I feel like I've really shared with others, particularly around sex after cancer. And so to have some of those products available to other people who don't live in the Boulder County area or the Boulder, Colorado area is really critical for me, because I want people to be able to at least try that on and see if it's something that resonates with them.
Right. Yeah, I hear that sense of being able to expand the offerings to other people, and to just enrich the lives of others, and recognizing that sometimes we're having fun and we have a lot of varied interests and we're being of service, but it may not be heading in a particular direction that's getting us where we want to go. And that's what I really hear that retreat did for you yesterday, as far as helping with that focus. And here are the 3 things, and one of them is talking, and that's what we're doing today, as well as the podcast and the online course material. So I think that's another helpful thing for people to recognize, just in general, in terms of that relationship with self and with other. If there's a particular desired outcome, if you will, that it can take some time to formulate what are the steps and the goals, to know that you're heading in the right direction. Am I getting it?
Yes. Yeah.
Is there more about that?
Well, it just made me think about the class that I've been teaching, because what I've seen with the women that I've worked with in the Rediscovering My Body class is that when they're able to, well, first of all, create a community, that they're all supporting each other and sharing their experiences, there's a sense of normalization, like things will be okay. And there's also this sense that not only will they be okay for themselves, but they'll be okay because then they have each other. And yeah, and I'm not, they're not quite clear on where the end will be, whether it's going to lead to an orgasm or mind-blowing sex, but they're willing to take themselves through the process and share it with the other women in the class. And so for me, that process has been really instrumental in my own learning about how I approach things, how I want to get things done, but I also want to enjoy the process.
Right. Right. Thank you for that example. It's a both and. It's, yes, we have this desired outcome, whether it's, you know, in your work with people and they're reclaiming their sexuality as a mind-blowing orgasm or, you know, a pure ecstasy, but also enjoying the journey. And you're really able to give us an example of that with these women you're working with and having them form those connections and bonds with each other. So that they know they're not alone, so that they get that sense of being resourced. And as you were saying that, I couldn't help but remember fondly our sense of connection in our graduate studies. And I believe we had a very unique program of the 3 years of going through every class and every retreat together and really getting to know each other. And I have what we call here in Hawaii chicken skin. I have goosebumps all over just as I think of that, just that real spiritual connection, because that sense of belonging and worthiness, as Brene Brown talks about, when we have that, indeed all things feel possible. And so it makes sense that you would harness that experience perhaps that you had at Naropa and share that with the women that you work with. And then I also hear that tremendous sense of reciprocity, that you're not just giving all the time, but you're receiving. And you're one of my colleagues, Tara, that I don't see as burnt out. And we're not all in that field of being resourced by our work. And so I would love it if you could say a little bit more about that.
Well, I always find that to be the most important piece, is that how am I taking care of myself? Because how am I showing up? If I'm giving to people and then feeling resentful about it because I'm not taking care of myself, then I'm really not giving to them. I'm giving them a headache.
Right.
And I don't want to show up like that. So it's very important for me that I start with a foundation. I start by taking care of myself. I do regular contemplative practices that help me stay where I want to be, even though I am moving forward in my life. But it helps me remember who I am, what it is that I need to do to be of service to myself and to others. And I feel like, particularly in my family, that it's so critical, because my daughter learns from me, my granddaughter learns from me, and that I need to be a role model. I am the matriarch, if you will. And if I just serve and then fall over, I'm really not serving anyone.
Right. And that's another piece that I forgot to mention in my introduction, is that you're a grandma now. So when I met you, you were a young mom, and that was 20 years ago. And my husband wanted to be sure to say you're the youngest grandma we know, in terms of your youthful spirit and your energetic connection with your kids. Not so much your chronological or biological age. That's not for me to disclose, but just that sense of engagement and being willing to be the matriarch and the model, and walk your talk, practice what you're helping others to get insight around. And as we're talking about this, you're kind of answering the next sentence stem, which is one thing I do to help get me there. And you talked about having that day of retreat and the goal setting in terms of getting where you want to go with your profession. Another thing that's helpful, I think, in terms of looking at where we want to go, is also recognizing any obstacles or barriers that might be in the way. So I'm curious, how would you respond to this sentence stem of one thing I'm doing that's getting in the way of getting what I want?
Mm-hmm. Well, I don't know how much I'm doing it now, but certainly last year I did a lot of it, and it's not always bad. It was way fun, but I was invited on a lot of trips, and so I traveled a lot. I traveled to India and Germany and Spain and Mexico, and various parts of the United States, and it was very fun, and I love to travel.
Mm-hmm.
However, again, I didn't have this sense of purpose, and I didn't have a clear outline of where I was going. I was just receiving the invitation and then just saying yes, and then just moving forward, and everything was very fun and fine and fluid, and that's great. It was a great space to be in. But now, as I'm really thinking about the things that I'd like to accomplish as my professional career continues, and as even reflecting upon what I would like it to look like at the end, I need to put certain things in place, because it became much clearer to me that these are essential to my work, to my existence as a human being, that I want to be able to provide these services, these experiences to people, and particularly to people who have had cancer or have that experience of being diagnosed with cancer, having cancer treatment. And if I don't get that done, that I would be quite sad. And so that acknowledgement to me has been powerful. And yeah, I'll still travel and I'll still have fun. And I built that into my next year planning, but it will be much more intentional, that I will also do the things that I need to do, like creating this online course suite for people who have had cancer, for women, for men, and for couples, and for the podcast on relationships, and for the book that I've actually written about rediscovering my body after cancer. That all those things are important just to get the word out there, really just to start the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I'd love to take a moment to weave in perhaps what sparked your interest in working in this field with these particular people in that way of, oh, if I don't do this, I just feel lost. I'm having a great time. I'm traveling around. Life is good. It sounds like things were poking along in a bubbly sort of way, but you really have this focus now of, let's get this work out there. And I know you're finished the course for women, and you're designing one for men and couples, and the podcast. Why cancer recovery? Why healing from that in terms of your overarching career, which was the sexual certified sex therapist? Can you share a little about that?
Certainly. So as a sex therapist, I really felt like my calling was to work with people and have an experience of social justice. It wasn't just enough to work with couples who were struggling with sexual dysfunction, erectile dysfunction, or premature ejaculation, or painful intercourse. That was wonderful. But what I really liked about doing this work with people who have had cancer is their amazing sense of reclaiming life. As they have really looked death in the face, and they've gone through all sorts of obstacles to then come into the classroom and be there and show up and say, I'm reclaiming my sexual identity. And that was quite powerful to me. And so when Nana Bo Christensen, who's a nurse navigator at Boulder Community Health, invited me to start teaching these classes, she said, you know, these classes are so needed, and the women always want to talk about sex in my support group, and everybody's always asking questions, but we don't have a class. She said, will you create this class? And so 4 years ago, I created the class, and I found it to be by far the most fulfilling part of my work, because again, we were creating this community, and that women were discovering parts of themselves that had been dormant forever, or it seemed like forever, and they didn't know would become enlivened again. They were really concerned, and that process allowed them to kind of crack themselves open, and they were very vulnerable. And again, they were very strong in the process as well, because they were persisting even when maybe they didn't have a partner, so they had to deal with dating, which seemed like that was a whole nother, nut
to crack.
Nut to crack, exactly. Thank you. I was saying egg to crack.
That might work too.
It's easy. Yeah. But this was hard. It was hard work. And then sometimes the women had partners, and they were persisting forward because their partner had given up, or their partner was really scared to touch them, because every time they had touched them recently, they caused pain. And so they stopped initiating, they stopped connecting with the woman in any sensual way.
Mm-hmm.
Really, we were starting kind of at ground zero. We were starting really at the beginning, and they were in this group together supporting each other. And they didn't all have the same type of cancer. There are multiple types of cancer: anal cancer, breast cancer, reproductive cancer. And so they had various concerns about how their bodies would work after this cancer experience. And they helped support each other through the process. And it was, for me, again, a very profound experience, and one that I knew that I wanted to be connected with. So I started working with other nonprofits who were helping people that had cancer. Live by Living is one of them. They work with people and take them out into nature. So you can go on a walk around, Wonderland Lake or in the park, just to be connected with nature. And you're talking and connecting with other people who've either been caregivers or have had cancer. And then they take, the people who are willing to go to the 10th Mountain Division hut trips. So they take them on these hut trips, sometimes in the snow. And it's great. And it's a really vigorous activity. And a lot of times the people had never done anything like that before, but they find such courage and strength because they want to be out in nature, and they want to do these things, to say that they've done them, to have the experiences, and to connect again with the other people. And so I just found myself really falling in love with the people who are doing such good work in the cancer community.
Right, right. Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm really hearing your devotion, if you will, just that outpouring of connection, of being inspired by people who've faced death, come to that sense, as you described it, of just starting over again, and then perhaps having different types of cancer, the different ways it showed up in each person's lives, but finding that common denominator of, okay, let's rekindle that. I couldn't help but think that the sexuality representing, the eros representing the life force. Mm-hmm. Let's reconnect with the life force. And as you were saying that, I was like, yeah, what else does that? And I thought of nature. And then you started talking about people going out in nature. And it's like, oh, it all just makes so much sense. And given what I know about you, Tara, this makes so much sense. Just that sparking joy, sparking light, magnifying those, stoking those fires of warmth and creativity, and, as you use the word, that sense of being enlivened and enlivening their bodies again. And I had the good fortune of speaking with you earlier, and I wanted to weave that into this conversation, this intentional interview, about vulnerability and strength. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that now.
Yes. So what I found is that it's so interesting to me, the facts, is that when I look statistically about how many doctors are speaking to their patients around sex and sexuality, 70% of doctors are not talking to their client about sex and sexuality, that they're more likely to mention it if there is a diagnosis of prostate cancer, which makes sense because then they're definitely worried about functionality. But other than that, most cancers, doctors are not talking about sex and sexuality after, during, and so there's really this paucity in the information. And 40% of us will have cancer. 40% of U.S. adults will have cancer in their lifetime. That's a lot of us. And so I just wanted to say those facts because I think that this is something that will continue to impact people. And so many people know of people who've had cancer and how cancer has impacted them and their relationship. And so in these classes, Rediscovering My Body, when I meet with these women, what I find is that they have cultivated tremendous strength to deal with the cancer diagnosis, deal with cancer treatment, deal with the physical impact on their body, and deal with the depletion of being financially and psychologically impacted. One woman I spoke to said the costs of her care was about $350,000. Fortunately, most of it was covered by insurance, but there was still thousands of dollars, about $10,000 that wasn't, and she wasn't earning money because she was struggling with healing, so she was not bringing any income in, and yet those bills were still coming in. And so I think this is really something that we as a culture, as a society, need to look at. And these women, they come in with tremendous strength, And what I find is that it's almost like it's this facade of I can take care of it, I'm in control, and a lot of it is real. Like they've really dealt with death, their own mortality, how cancer has impacted themselves and their families, how dynamics have changed, and I so honor that. And in order to get to the piece of sexuality, the strength is important, but also the vulnerability, that they can be relaxed enough to achieve an orgasm, or they can be vulnerable enough to tell their partner what they do find pleasurable now in their new body that they have reconnected with and reimagined, and are now willing to explore with their partner, with somebody they're dating, or with somebody new in their lives. And that's, I'd say, pretty courageous stuff. And it's only through being vulnerable that the women can really get there. So it really is this tremendous journey of strength and vulnerability.
I appreciate you elaborating more on that, because I'm hearing more and more people express that idea that, wow, if I'm vulnerable and I let other people in, I let myself be transparent and be known, that it actually is a way of strength. But when we're speaking specifically about healing from cancer and that sense of, being vulnerable, being susceptible, being, penetrated, or, absorbing other things that we may not want to absorb, there's a nuance to that. And I think you were able to speak to that. And I think, throughout our intentional interview, there's this coming back to the present moment and then widening the lens to the future, to the hopes, to the desired outcomes, coming back to the moment, and then looking back at when we met at Naropa 20 years ago and that journey, and then coming back. And I guess I'm having this exhale, or widening the lens around sexuality more in general for women, and the people I've worked with and had the good fortune of interacting with, and my own journey in a conversation I had just yesterday with my husband about women, and what does it mean if there's a low level of desire. And I had this hunch, and I wanted to run it by you because you're an expert in the field. This is not my area of expertise, but I'm curious. As women, I feel that I'll speak for myself. I'm wired to be aware of everything. It's almost like my consciousness is this, I've heard it described as a pile of spaghetti. It's just kind of going everywhere. Whereas for a man, it perhaps is more compartmentalized, like the Eggo waffle, right? Different little sections. And I've also heard, and I don't know if you find this to be true in your experience, but for men, their tapes, the story they tell themselves, the images that are running through the movie of their lives is kind of like going into a sports bar, and there are all those screens going with different sports, and that's kind of like what sexuality is like for a man. There's like kind of a constant of background juices flowing, if you will. Whereas for women, we're thinking about the whole bigger picture, and I can only imagine, given what I've heard you say, if I think about a cancer diagnosis on top of that would definitely infiltrate and affect all of those thoughts and desires. And so my curiosity was, do women in general perhaps have a lower initiative, desire, starting things up, getting things going, because they're so busy thinking about everything else? But once they're in the act, I'm talking too much. I'm going to stop now. Any thoughts on that? I'm just going on and on.
Well, what I will say is that oftentimes we are aroused in our nervous system, and that it tends towards a little bit more anxiety. And this is a gross generalization, but yes, we do have our pulse on what's happening with the kids. Who's going to cook dinner? What are we cooking for dinner? And in order for us to come into our parasympathetic nervous system and become more relaxed, then we need to do, a disengagement, if you will. And I'll just reference Dr. Luann Brisendine's book, which is called The Female Brain. And what she talks about is soothing and smoothing. And so 24 hours before intercourse, if you will, she will say that the female brain needs to experience soothing and smoothing, so this way the sexual activity can begin. And in that kind of window of opportunity, it's a good time to do some foot rubs, or to have some warm baths, or to do things that are going to relax your nervous system. And that there are certain triggers that women may experience within that 24-hour window, such as, I mean, and they can be really mundane things, like a pet peeve of, you got bad breath, and then you get shut down, and then you kind of got to start over. Right. And I love that. When I talk about that in my classes, all of the women are like, yes, 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 because they do know that, yeah, they're thinking about what's happening with the kids, who's cooking dinner, and that is all going on in their brain. But if they know, 24 hours in advance, if you will, that that's where things are going, what they're leading towards, then that's helpful for them to release and relieve some of that anxiety. So, as a sex therapist and encouraging people in their relationships, I've been married for a few decades. I like for people to schedule things. This myth of spontaneity is great, and it's a myth. It's, it happens at the beginning of the courtship, but to keep it sustained is not necessarily a reality. With the same partner, you need to create the intention to have that erotic experience. And so I tell people to schedule it. And when you're able to schedule an experience, whether it is, intercourse, or it's just sex play, and it's some sensual touch, that there is an opportunity for the women to relax into their parasympathetic nervous system, and then also to alleviate some of the anxiety. But then the best part is that it can build anticipation of, I know it's going to happen. I know something's good going to happen. I may even have an orgasm, and yay! And something to look forward to. And the women are like, oh, that makes so much sense.
Yeah. Oh, that's such a beautiful way to kind of bring our conversation back, because I was just thinking about what we started with the desired outcome and being willing to set the goals. And I was just going to ask that question of, what do you think about scheduling sex? And you segued right into that. So that's beautiful. Just that, and I know for myself, I've suggested that to couples I've worked with, and also with my partner. And, it's like, oh, really? We live together. Why do we have to schedule it? Because laundry happens, because life happens. And, it's an interesting balance of both and, that tending to oneself. I love to get up and do my creative practice, do my yoga, do my meditation early in the morning. I also love to spend time with my beloved in bed. And so it's both and. And, Sunday mornings has kind of turned into our time together. And it's like, okay, we're relaxing into that. And, I'm so curious, how much is enough? But I'm sure that's a question that each couple needs to determine for themselves.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And I think it's great to schedule intimate times together. And, you can have a menu of activities. So this is a kissing date. We're going to schedule that. This is a hugging date. I always tell my couples to hug. And I tell them to do it through David Schnarch's way, hugging until relaxed. And that's a great practice. But I also think then there's these spontaneous, affectionate moments where, they decide they're just going to kiss, or they're just going to have sex. And that's great too. So I think both and, but the scheduling, there does seem to be resistance to that. But I think that it's a really good thing, because when it happens regularly, I see it as kind of like a deposit into the relationship. It is an investment that's happening on a regular basis, and that you're going to see a return on that investment, and that it's so good for couples to do that.
Great. Yeah, that's, I think, a beautiful relationship skill for people to take with them from our conversation today. Just that idea of investing the time, investing the scheduling, investing the goals, if you will, and the return on investment is so worth it. And I really value all that you've had to share. I could go on and on with you, but I'm thinking it's time we need to wrap up. I'm working with the timer here and looking at maybe a final sentence stem, which is one thing I do to tend to the space between. And that could be the space between you and your beloved, or you and spirit, or you and your next thought. How would you respond to that one?
I'd say that it's about connecting to my breath. Is that when I connect to my breath, that I can be in the space in between, and I can be in the present moment, and I can be.
Wonderful, wonderful. So in that notion of connecting with breath, let's take a bow out, and then I'll give you a moment to address our audience. How does that sound?
Sounds great.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Tara. Inhaling.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. And Tara, would you like to take a moment to share with our listeners a free gift that you would be willing to offer?
Yes, So I actually have two, because I was so excited to be doing this with you. So the first one is a free guide, and it is a wonderful guide for people who've experienced cancer and cancer diagnosis, cancer treatment, and what it is to be sexual during cancer treatment and after diagnosis. And so I created this guide as a gift for the audience here, and the access code is sex after cancer, all one word, all lowercase letters. So just click on the link and put in that password, and the guide is yours. And then I also thought, because it would be so great to reach people who aren't necessarily struggling with cancer or terminal illness or any type of chronic illness, but people who just want to regulate their nervous system, I wanted to teach Dr. David Berceli's trauma releasing exercises, or TRE. So I set up a time on Zoom to do that Wednesday. I believe it is February 14th, which is Valentine's Day, which sometimes people can feel a lot on that day. And so I wanted people to give the gift to themselves of self-love, to try to regulate and restore their nervous system through this process of tension releasing or trauma releasing exercises. So that information is also here as well.
Wonderful, wonderful. I know I've had the good fortune of doing that work with you. When I last saw you in Colorado, I had a taste of that, and it is definitely worth further exploration. So thank you for those generous gifts, one or the other, or perhaps both, for our interested audience. And you'll find the written information in the bio that was sent out in the emails. So again, hearty thanks to you, Tara. Thank you so much for your time and your wisdom and your generous sharing. And I wish you the best on your journey until we meet again.
Until we meet again.
Thank you.